Talk to yourself is between you and yourself. Nobody else is involved in this process. Nobody else's opinion is involved in this process. Nobody else's ideas are involved in this process. And nobody else's judgments are involved in this process. What you say to yourself is a private conversation between you and you. And it should be one that's encouraging. All of us talk to ourselves. Admittedly, today, I am sure we would all be willing to admit that. How do you normally talk to yourself? What are the things that you normally say? Do you say things that are encouraging, or do you say things that are discouraging? And for most of us, it's a bit of both. It just depends on what's going on and what we're looking to face or what challenges we have. Talk to yourself means, though, to do it with more intention. One part of talking to yourself is to choose some words that perhaps you might want to remove from your vocabulary. One of the most powerful words that I was taught to remove from my vocabulary was the word can't. It's just interesting, the way that you feel when you choose to say different things. I was taught that can't doesn't really exist as a word, that there's two options that you can choose to more properly express what you really feel by using words that are more accurate. As opposed to saying I can't, instead choose to say either I don't want to or I don't know how to. Virtually everything that we would generally say I can't to falls under one of those two categories. And it's just interesting. Saying the word I can't somehow feels a little bit limiting or judgmental. Saying the word I don't want to, that's empowering. Saying the words I don't know how to means I can learn. So it's just interesting. How do you talk to yourself? So selecting words to eliminate from our vocabulary and inserting new words is an extremely powerful practice as well. Some people think talking to yourself means using affirmations. Now, for some people, affirmations are fantastic. For many other people, though, they don't feel genuine. That was certainly my experience with affirmations when I was learning to talk to myself. Mostly the reason was because they were written by other people. So if I was saying out loud an affirmation, all it really did was make me hear in my voice that I didn't believe what I was saying out loud. I couldn't hear the genuineness in my own voice. So it felt like I was acting and I was bad at it. That form of talking to yourself isn't as effective. So instead of using affirmations, I learned to speak to myself in a different way. Sometimes we wake up in the morning and we are absolutely waking up on the wrong side of the bed. For a lot of us, it's a struggle. Sometimes when we go to bed, we've decided that we're going to do something great tomorrow, but when we wake up, our commitment is absolutely gone. We've decided that we're going to do nothing of the sort within the first minute of being awake, and that completely cancels out our plans from the previous evening. I had a huge battle when I was working, running a business, looking to change things in my life, and I would wake up in the morning and it was like turning on my desktop. Everything that I had going on in my world that I was concerned about, worried about, or thinking about started to arrive before I had barely even opened my eyes. I would open my eyes, look at the clock, and all of these thoughts would descend. What's going on with my finances? What's going on with my business? What's happening with my relationship? What's happening with my body, my wardrobe, my family, my commitments, my deadlines? Everything would arrive, and I would be awake for 3 seconds. And then I would have to go through the process of trying to undo all of that worry, undo that stress, undo that concern, and put my day back in order. And it was like fighting a war. Waking up that way was absolutely exhausting. I was pretty good at being able to stay more emotionally influential in a positive way throughout the course of my day, but where I was standing no chance was in the morning time when I woke up. And so this caused me to start to think about my emotions as well in a sort of unique way, but in a way that I believe gives me influence and power, and perhaps will do the same for you. I think of every single one of the emotions that I have as an entirely different version of me. So there are all of these different personalities that all have the opportunity to drive this avatar. They all get an option and an opportunity to be the one in charge when I permit them to be. And so this allows me, thinking of it this way, instead of getting upset with myself for being upset and then for feeling this way and then going through a process of negative kind of beating me up, as opposed to doing that, I've now learned to realize that I gave that guy control for a little while. And that guy, he can't have control. No chance. Because as we discussed in the last video, high performers, we go all out, regardless of which emotion it is that we're looking to take on. So by looking at emotions that way, it gives me influence. And it allows me to make a decision on which ones I want to let in. These guys were the ones that suddenly at, the time that I was waking up in the morning, that's when they would pounce. It was like they were waiting until my eyes opened up and then they jumped in, right? Kind of like the movie Ghost, and you would remember seeing Whoopi Goldberg jump in. I imagine that that's exactly what would occur. I learned a way to beat it. I wrote messages to myself. Morning messages were written to myself the night before. So it sounded hokey at the beginning, perhaps, and I was a huge holdout when it came to using any of these things. I'm a huge skeptic. Anything that doesn't resonate as genuine or authentic or feels right for me, absolutely not a practicer of. And so it began by using the very simple basic things, the Post-it tools, and I would write a message on this and stick it beside my alarm clock. And it was whatever I thought I needed to hear in order to stay on track and not allow this, morning mayhem to start my day. Some of the messages would be some very simple things like stop it, or just breathe, or you got this, or whatever it was. I don't want to give too many examples because it's really important that when you do your messages that you make them messages that you need to hear from you to you so that it resonates, so that when you read it, you buy the message. I would put it beside my bed. I would go to sleep. I would wake up in the morning, the exact same habit of opening my eyes and looking to see what time it was would automatically kick in on autopilot. But all of a sudden now, before my desktop had a chance to wake up, I was reading one of these messages and my desktop wouldn't turn on. So I had learned a way to beat them. Worry, concern, all of these different little emotions, they learned that they had a really strong chance right in the seconds when I first woke up, before I was consciously in control of being in a positive place. I learned a way to beat them. These messages gave me the reminder I needed before I was fully awake, before I was fully aware. And it let me be able to have some influence over the time that I was the weakest when it came to being able to be in a positive mindset. So using morning messages are an incredibly powerful practice to ensure that when you begin your day thinking about the things that you want to think about, and you're not subjected to thinking about the things that perhaps make you feel off track. A word of caution though, when you first start doing these morning messages, you may also be skeptical, which is absolutely natural. So you may put your message there, you may wake up, you may look at the message, you may read the message, you may think, like whatever, that was supposed to help. And then continue to have, the normal things and struggles show up and continue through the day. And again, that's a normal part of this practice. So what I implore you to do is don't take the message down. This is not anything that anyone is trying to sell you on for the benefit of anybody else whatsoever but you. Change the message if you don't like it. Change it to something that you think you need to hear instead. Experiment with that, but leave the message there, because what will happen is after however many days it takes you to stop being resistant towards this, crazy idea, one day you will wake up, you'll read that message, and you're gonna believe it. And when that day happens for you, you will have an entirely different day. And the influence that you learned to have over your ability to wake up and be the person you need to be when you want to perform is a life-changing experience, because you can do it every single day that you choose to. Another type of message that I needed to hear, I call midnight messages. And those are for any of us that wake up in the middle of the night haunted. 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, all of a sudden, some of the biggest problems that we didn't even know were going on, or we did, are right there looking us in the face at 4 o'clock in the morning. All of those, crazy, wildly irrational thoughts, panic, anxiety, worry, everything would descend at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning when I could do nothing about it except lie, stay awake, and then completely be exhausted the next day. I created midnight messages. They were just 8.5 by 10 pieces of paper. They were posted on the ceiling, and they were a little bit more aggressive. They were a little bit more assertive because they needed to be. I needed to hear that voice in order to make me go back to sleep. Whatever the messages that you may need to hear, and again, you have to experiment with it, I would also then put right beside the message another piece of paper that had a suggestion for something else for me to think about. So the art of distraction is a very powerful thing, which would then take my mind from where it was about to go, and it would put it somewhere that was much more productive. As soon as I would open my eyes and start to feel that anxiety show up, the panic, I would see the midnight message, I would read the stop it, and then all of a sudden I would be over here and I'd be thinking about now something that I liked to think about or wanted to figure out, and it was productive and it was good, and I'd go right back to sleep. Now, I'm not saying that these are absolute solutions, but what they do have is influence. The first few times that you go through this process, you may not buy what your messages are saying. You may think whatever, and it's not going to work, and allow it to not work. The intention of you keeping the messages up there is that you do give yourself the opportunity to have influence. And after a few days, you're going to start to allow yourself to have the influence you've been looking for. A third kind of messages were mirror messages, and these are really, really common. They're simply messages that exist in your get ready space. Give yourself input by putting messages on your mirror. One of the things that we were taught was that when we were teaching a class, we had to ensure that we had something that was visual as well as something for people to listen to, because most people are visual learners as opposed to just auditory learners. And so, knowing this fact, it struck me that when I'm standing in my bathroom as somebody who did not subscribe to putting these messages on my mirror at the time, I was giving myself no type of messaging. And what we do whenever we're in any space, and this is all of us, we're constantly looking for visual stimulation. We're constantly reading and rereading and reading and rereading the posters and the signs that are in the spaces that we visit on a regular basis. When you're in the elevator, how many times have you read the stuff on the elevator board? Over and over again. How many times have you looked at the numbers that are all lit up? Over and over again. Our eyes look for things in order to receive input. So to not be intentional with putting something that we can read over and over and over and over and over again in the space when I was getting ready in the morning was a missed opportunity to be able to ensure that I felt good and like the best version of me so that I can have the kind of life experience that I want to have. So by putting these messages on the mirror, all of a sudden there is this chime of messages that are speaking to you, and it gives you a completely different type of influence over being in that room and having whatever possible random thought wants to show up and take up space and hijack your mind for a little while. Don't allow that to happen. Using these messages is an incredible practice to be able to allow yourself to have influence to keep you in an extremely powerful place.